Greetings and welcome to Flanigan's Ecologic. I am your host, Ted Flanigan, and today Andrew Rothman is my guest. Pleased to have Andrew Rothman as my guest. He's the Wildlife Campaigns Director at Environment America. I had the pleasure of meeting him last month when touring the Wallace-Annenberg Wildlife Crossing in Agoura Hills, California, a massive $100 million structure crossing LA's infamous Highway 101. Andrew, as we will quickly ascertain, is a dedicated conservationist with a mission to protect wildlife. He clearly has a passion for animals with an admirable track record of birds in Latin America. He is building bridges to connect and protect our planet. Very happy to have him on the show today. Andrew, welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Ted. Really great to be here. Appreciate you having me.
Well, thanks so much for joining us. And you told me just as we were hopping on that you got some big news today.
Yeah, we do. So it could be a little bit wonky, but the main thing is that there is a bill that has been introduced as a marker bill to focus on getting additional funding for a program in the Department of Transportation called the Wildlife Crossings Pilot Program. And so this is a program that was originally funded through the Biden administration's Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the IIJA. It provided $350 million over 6 years for funding of initial wildlife crossing projects and planning. There have been two sets of grants opportunities that have gone out, and in some 35 projects in 30 states have been funded thus far through that. However, that particular program was set to sunset. Again, it was a pilot program, and it was set to sunset at the end of September 2026. And so Congress is just starting to get back into session. And as part of that, they're talking about a new Department of Transportation highway bill. And we were fortunate enough just this morning, to have Representative Don Beyer of Virginia and Representative Ryan Zinke of Montana introduce a bill to reauthorize and permanently authorize that bill and provide 6 more years of funding, except for this time at $200 million a year. So we're talking about a potential investment of $1.2 billion in wildlife crossings over the next 6 years.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, we love hearing about good news from Washington, don't we?
Yeah.
Well, now, was the motivation for that bill? We've had Beth Pratt on and Julia Kinch and Cecily D'Angelo, and we've talked about wildlife crossings quite a bit. And of course, there's the huge benefit to wildlife, of course. And then there's also a huge benefit to motorist safety. So what was driving that Washington legislation? Was it a combination of those two things?
Yeah, it really is both. We have both a wildlife issue. Collisions with vehicles directly cause mortality. And then we also have the safety issue with those collisions creating a lot of damage, some $10 billion in damage annually from wildlife vehicle collisions. Thousands of people end up in the hospital, and unfortunately hundreds of people lose their lives due to collisions with large animals, including deer, elk, etc. And so, yeah, really there is, and this is an issue that our organization, Environment America, sees as an issue where we can have what we call a transpartisan solution, one that goes above the fray and isn't on one side or the other. And you think about the safety side of things, whether you're a family driving a minivan or you're a motorcycle rider, you want, highway safety, and you certainly don't want to hit an animal. Or if you are a hunter or you care about endangered species, you don't want to see, the species that you care about hit on the side of the road. And so wildlife crossings is a solution that we see as a solution to two problems that has a lot of support from all kinds of different people.
Absolutely. And I mentioned the Wallace-Annenberg crossing, which is just incredible. I mean, I was so impressed by it. I am so impressed by it. But that was a $100 million structure. I take it most of them are not that expensive.
Correct. That's a really large structure. It's going to be one of the largest in the world. There are wildlife crossings like overpasses like that one that are certainly visually appealing. And when people think of a wildlife crossing, they'll probably think of a big bridge like that. However, there's lots of other smaller structures. Existing bridges can be modified so that their underpasses can be targets for wildlife movement. Culverts can be widened or replaced to make them larger to allow terrestrial wildlife to cross through, and also improve them for aquatic species as well, fish, etc. And so there are a whole variety of different kinds of wildlife crossings, and the cost of those, of course, vary. And importantly, the earlier we're thinking about any kind of road infrastructure project, and we're starting to take into consideration wildlife movement, and how such a investment could be made, and we're thinking about wildlife, the earlier we incorporate those plans to incorporate a wildlife crossing, the cheaper it'll be.
Right. And I believe there's a really big one being built. You're in Denver now, I think. And
Correct.
isn't there one right on the I-25, right?
Yep.
Just south
So,
of Denver?
yeah, the route from Denver on I-25 down south to Colorado Springs,
Springs, yeah.
just kind of north of Monument. It's called the Greenland overpass. And we just heard word this morning that that's going to be done in a couple of weeks. The construction will be completed soon.
All right. Good news. Good news. Well, I want to talk about Environmental America, but I do want to go all the way back and just figure out a little bit about Andrew Rothman. You have devoted your career to wildlife and to birds and ecotourism. And how did this come about? How did you choose that? I'm an energy guy.
Uh-huh.
How did you glom onto wildlife? Must have been at an early age.
Yeah, it really was. And certainly as a kid growing up, I'm originally from Wisconsin. My family has a cabin in the North Woods, and we'd go up there and go fishing. And, that was, of course, home to lots of wildlife, raccoons, bears, and things of that nature. And so just being there in the North Woods of Wisconsin, and reading a lot of books. There was actually a group of books called the Burgess books. There's an author who wrote these great stories for children about wildlife. And I think that at an early age got me interested in wildlife. And then as a kid of the 80s, started hearing about the destruction of the rainforest, and in particular, the destruction of rainforest for beef production. And of course, that was a big thing, rainforest beef. And I think that kind of launched a spark in me to want to do something to protect habitat for wildlife. And at an early age, I was very interested in rainforest conservation as well.
Yeah, and you created, I believe, this rainforest biodiversity program. You were the founder of that am I right, in the year 2000?
Yep. Kind of out of college, started my own nonprofit organization, Rainforest Biodiversity Group. And I had some experience working in Costa Rica. And so we launched this 501c3 based out of Wisconsin that works and has a sister group in Costa Rica. And then we focused a lot early on, and actually connectivity work, helping to advance the San Juan La Selva biological corridor, which is part of a larger Mesoamerican biological corridor throughout Central America. And so it was working there with private landowners, and kind of going through the story here a little bit. That's how we started to try to support landowners who were interested in conservation. Maybe they had some agriculture or something that they were doing to have some income from the farm, but they were looking for other opportunities to have some income that would allow them to protect some of their forests that remained. And so as part of building this biological corridor, we started to support private landowners in creating small bird tourism businesses.
Small what business?
Bird tourism.
Yeah, bird tourism. I wanted to get to that because I believe you had the first bird tourism trail in Latin America. And so you were, talk a little bit more about that. Were you bringing people down from North America, going to Central America, that were just keen on seeing these birds, and you actually figured out a pathway that you could go through some of these landowners' parcels and really give them a good experience?
Yeah, exactly. And so at the time there was actually, I think, two existing bird trail concepts. One was the Great Texas Birding Trail. There was the Great Florida Birding Trail, and then the state of Wisconsin was also working on one. And so the entity that was working with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources in the state to create the Wisconsin Birding Trail was an outfit called Fermata. And I had an opportunity to meet with Ted Eubanks, who was running Fermata. And we basically started to talk about an idea for a birding trail in Latin America, which hadn't really been done before. And I was part of this program to try to develop this biological corridor, and saw this opportunity of, how can we connect people who want to come see tropical birds in Costa Rica? Of course, ecotourism is a main driver of income in Costa Rica. There were some existing lodges in the area, and our thought was, well, how can we bring people to these lodges and then also get them out to some of these more remote sites where they would have a chance to not only see great birds, but experience some of the rural culture and meet some of the people that are really trying to take care of their own farms, but do better for conservation and the species that are there in their area.
And so the trail, first off, that's fantastic. The trail would be like, the corridor might be hundreds of miles long. I mean, do people actually hike the trail, or do they take cars?
So it was more of a map concept, in the sense of, we have opportunities to do different routes. You might go to one site, and then 2 days later you go to another site, and then a day later you might go to another site. It's more of a map with opportunities to kind of create your own birding tour. And here are some of the best sites to visit, and some of the target species that you might find at some of those sites. And that allowed people to create the birding adventure that they desired. Yeah.
And the great green macaw apparently is that one of the most popular birds to see in Costa Rica?
And it's a IUCN Red List endangered species. So it's a highly threatened bird. Population was previously went basically from kind of Honduras all the way down into Colombia, and then there's a small population in Ecuador. But that population has been broken up to some of the last remaining large fragments of habitat in Central America. And so this corridor that we're working on in Costa Rica, this San Juan La Selva biological corridor, connected lowland rainforest habitat on the border of Nicaragua and Costa Rica, where the great green macaws breed. And then there's kind of an altitudinal migration of this particular species to the higher Central Volcanic Mountain Range in Costa Rica, where they take their young. And so we were trying to protect this particular corridor for this one species, but not just this one species, of course, but lots of other species. But the biology of this particular species made it such that having that kind of altitudinal migratory corridor was really important. And again, we've been working to help protect this species for 20 years now.
Good stuff. And does this guy like you, I mean, you started off sort of influenced by, or falling in love with nature in the woods of Wisconsin, and then you're down in Costa Rica. You've written about all sorts of different species. Are you just like, all wildlife is a good thing? I mean, I presume.
I mean, of course, there's invasive species that I have problems with that we have to deal with. But certainly, native wildlife. And there was a report that came out from World Wildlife Fund and the Zoological Society of London that showed that we've lost some 75% of wildlife globally. At least of 5,000 species, there were about 5,400 species they looked at, and their populations globally had decreased some 75% since 1970. And in North America, that's around 40%. So in North America, we've lost some 40% of our wildlife since 1970.
And this is just humanity encroaching on natural habitat and cutting it up and dissecting it, or is that right?
Yeah, of course. Habitat loss is a major driver of all of those things. Of course, the toxins and pollutants that we're putting into the soil, water, and air, of course, contributing to those things as well. But as we continue to grow we're certainly reducing the amount of available habitat for our, what I like to call more than human friends.
Right, right. Well, you've written a lot, you've lectured a lot. One thing that caught my eye was the protecting wildlife from jet fighter training. And I can't imagine anything more horrifying if I was an animal than having a jet fighter screaming across the sky, right?
Yeah, so there's a number of places where there certainly is, Air Force and military trainings,
Yeah.
and the Southwest. There is more there than in other places, and there's been efforts to, lower the altitude at which some of these jets can train. These jets
Mm.
are also dropping, practice munitions that can be hot and cause fires. And certainly, yeah, the sound of that is going to disturb any wildlife as well as any hikers trying to use any of these nearby areas.
Right, and I know NRDC did a lot of work with protecting whales from, I think, bomb testing in the ocean. And then recently, I've been reading about space and launching rockets and the impact to wildlife as we're launching more and more rockets and creating all sorts of sonic booms. So the wildlife needs an advocate, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
All right, and talk about Environment America, because we can weave around in your career, but you started to work for EA just this past year, right?
Yeah. So actually, I've only been on a little more than 3 months now, so
Hmm.
I'm very new to Environment America, and am, the wildlife campaigns director, and again, we're focusing very much on wildlife connectivity, wildlife crossings, wildlife corridors, as well as advocating for wildlife in the U.S.
Well, this is across the country. You're based in Denver, but your work is across the country.
Yeah, so Environment America is basically our national organization.
Hmm.
And so we also have organizations in 30 other states. So they're not chapters, they're their own organizations. And so there's Environment California, Environment Washington, Environment Virginia, et cetera. And so kind of how we work is the Environment America will often work at kind of a national
Mm.
scale, oftentimes focused on federal policy, like we talked about earlier in the podcast. But then we also are working at a state level with our state organizations to support the work in individual states. And I'll just say that one of the things that is really, I think, powerful about our organization is that we like to work at the not only the state level but at the local level.
Mm.
Much of our work is literally educating people. We're one of the few organizations that still runs a canvas. Like we still go
Mm.
door to door and knock on people's doors to find out what issues they care about and tell people and educate people about issues that we're working on. So, we're very much like to engage with people where they are.
And so you got the wildlife. That's your responsibility now. But there's I imagine you have colleagues that are focused on other things like toxins. What are the other spheres of influence that EA is
Yeah, sure.
involved in?
My program is part of the conservation program, and I actually say
Mm.
that I have all wildlife that's not in the ocean or is not a pollinator. And we actually have a couple of other programs. So we do have a ocean program that focuses on all things ocean, in particular marine life and marine mammals. And then we also have a campaign called Save the Bees, and so that
Mm.
campaign is very much about just that, saving our pollinators, and in particular, reducing the ability for neonicotinoids, or neonics for short, to be out in the landscape. And of course, that's so prevalent, unfortunately, in the agricultural industry. And we're looking for ways to restrict, the use of neonics, and support pollinator habitat across the U.S.
Now back up a little bit here. Neonics. Explain that again. Is that like a pesticide or a?
So yes, correct. Neonicotinoids are a type of pesticide.
Mm.
They really mess with the endocrine system of insects, in particular bees, and so yeah, it results in bees and other pollinators dying rapidly. And what the industry has done is coated seeds with these neonicotinoids.
Hmm.
And the seeds then, when they germinate, actually have some of this neonic in them. And so the fruits, the leaves, other parts of the plant can still have this neonic contaminant inside of them. And that's one problem just for anybody that's eating that, or any animal that is perhaps trying to feed on it, thus the pesticide.
Yeah.
But those individual seeds, and getting back to birds, just one seed can have enough contaminant to kill a bird. And so if a bird eats these seeds directly before they germinate, they're going to have problems as well.
Let's even take this to a higher level. Make a broad, sweeping statement about the value of wildlife to society.
Well, wildlife enriches our lives. Wildlife is a part of our planet, and we have benefits that we receive from wildlife, not only in terms of the joy and connection to life that we share, but wildlife forever has provided us sustenance, and so we share this planet with wildlife. And as we continue to grow in population, we need to make sure that we're continuing to be able to support populations of our more than human brethren.
Kind of keeps us in perspective, huh? We stay in our ecological lane, or stay within our niche, but don't wipe out all the other ecological niches that are out there that are contributing to the ecosystem as a whole, I guess.
Ecosystem function, right? Like all of these pieces we need to maintain. I don't want to misquote the quote about the importance of keeping all of the pieces, but that is important. Keeping all of these pieces, the ecosystem function, is what keeps us alive as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's in our self-interest at the end of the day, and in a sort of a longer term perspective. You before EA, you were at Wild Earth Guardians. Talk a little bit about what is it, organization?
Yep. So that's an organization. It's a West-wide organization that focuses on, again, wildlife, climate and energy, water, and public lands. And so in that role, actually, I was our public lands, or what we called the Wild Places Program Director. And so a lot of that work was focused on kind of watchdogging what our agencies are doing on our public lands. Of course, there's lots of fights right now, I would say, to help ensure that we continue to protect our public lands. Public lands are under deep threat. And so in that role, I was part of the effort to ensure that, we're not unduly extracting resources from our public lands, including timber, in a way that is going to harm wildlife and harm endangered species and contaminate our water, et cetera.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like that job and your current job, you have a balance between educating people and then advocating for policies. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And those go hand in hand. And building people power is one of the things that we at Environment America do to influence policy, right? If we want to have our legislators be responsive to our needs, we need to have the power and have the voice to share what those needs are.
So what do you consider your greatest challenge today in your career?
Good question. I think part of it is the breadth and width of the threats.
Yeah. I would think.
There's so much coming at all of us all the time. And the important thing is that we find solutions to these problems. And not only do we need to start to change our behaviors to slow the problem, But then we're going to have to find the mechanisms to solve the impacts of those problems as well.
Yeah, I like what you're saying. The breadth. When I think about your job across the country and all of the different species that you're looking at and all of the forms of encroachment that are threatening these species, how do you prioritize? And then, of course, you're up against funding realities, I'm sure. I mean, I usually during a Republican administration, the funding for nonprofits increases, but even still, I imagine that you have to make some pretty tough decisions on where to put your precious resources, right?
Absolutely. And two things to touch on there. One is
Hmm.
this idea that I talked about before of kind of looking for solutions that are transpartisan or more than bipartisan, right? And so part of the way that we prioritize our work is not necessarily to take the most environmentally friendly solution all of the time, but one that is going to be something that we think that we can win on, right? And
Hmm.
so we're going to take the position that we think is best to have advancement toward the solution or the impact that we're looking for. But we
Hmm.
also know that if we take a particular position and there's no buy-in from half the country, that solution probably isn't going to go very far. And
Hmm.
so that's part of our prioritization process. And then to the funding part,
Hmm.
we really value every dollar that we get from every donor. And I talked previously about the fact that we still have a canvas, and
You did.
a great amount of our funding comes from small dollar donors. And so whether it's people giving $5, $100, $500, we value each of those dollars equally. And so the canvas is also an important part of how we connect with people and how we get people involved with our movement and directly supporting us.
And what exactly is the canvas?
So yeah, literally we will have parts of our campaign and basically an education campaign to go out and knock on doors and talk to people about the issues that we're working on, trying to perhaps get people to sign a petition
Yep.
to support a particular position that we're supporting, write a letter to their congressional about something, and then also support our work by providing a donation.
And that sounds like maybe that's use a lot of volunteers to do that.
A lot of volunteers, but then also, yeah, we have paid staff that are part of our canvas.
Right. And how can somebody support EA if they want to give money to your organization?
Yeah, you can go to our website. It's environmentamerica.org, and you can donate right there to support all of the work that's part of our portfolio of
Right.
projects.
Like what you said about your prioritization and being pragmatic and recognizing when you ain't going to win one, you don't want to you don't want to put a lot of resources towards that. You must have to tell the purists at times just to pipe down a little bit. We've got a mission. We've got a mission here. I didn't. I'm hitting you with this as very much of a curveball, but I told you earlier that I have a house in Colorado, and
Mhm.
wolves have been reintroduced into that ecosystem. Oh my God, has it been controversial?
It certainly has. It certainly has. It is an issue that, from the inception of the whole ballot initiative, has been controversial. I know many people who care about wildlife, but didn't vote for that for the reason that they were fearful that whatever wolves brought to Colorado were going to get killed in some way. And
Yeah,
unfortunately, that's been proven true in many
sure.
ways. There certainly is continued effort to restore a population in Colorado, but there are lots of difficulties with it. And of course, there's people that want to see wolves and people that want to see wolves but are concerned about the impacts of wolves on their livelihoods. And that continues to be a hot topic, in particular for Colorado Parks and Wildlife, who's having to manage the putting of wolves on the ground and managing that whole program.
Yeah, yeah. Very, very contentious. Did EA take a position on that issue?
I wasn't here when that launched, but I don't believe that we did.
You don't? Yeah. Very good. Oh, wow. And what I take it, you are living in Denver now.
Yep.
I think you've got fairly young children. They must keep you right on your toes as they tend to do. How do you get balance in life? What is your way of maintaining your sanity and blowing off steam, that kind of thing?
Appreciate the question. And yeah, I've got an 8-year-old daughter who definitely keeps me on my toes. That's a good way to put it. But hanging out with her is great, and sometimes it adds to the stress, sometimes it takes it away. But I like to certainly get her and my wife outside. And it sounds cliche for an environmental person to be like, I love to get outside, but absolutely,
Yeah, no, I'm with you.
the concept of forest bathing is real, and getting outside,
Oh,
having an opportunity to kind of let things go, reconnect is certainly something that I take part in. And of course, as a birder, I like to get out and observe birds. And then I'll also say, because I've got my Milwaukee Brewer and Green Bay Packer helmet behind me, that I'm a big sports fan, and heading to the bar to watch a game with a buddy is also a good pastime that I
yeah, that's all
partake in.
good. I love that term forest bathing. I'd never heard that before, but I can just relate to that. And then, well, I was a little disappointed to hear about the Green Bay Packers. I'm a dedicated Broncos fan, and of course, we're kicking butt this year, so it's got to be a lot of enthusiasm around Denver.
Absolutely, and we'll have a chance to play on December 14th. So I'll be there with a bunch of friends from Wisconsin and hanging with some friends from Denver.
Hey, thanks for being on the podcast. Thanks for what you're doing for wildlife and for our society, which needs balance in all different ways. Thanks again for being on the podcast, Andrew.
It was a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me, Ted.
That's it. Thanks for listening to Flanigan's Ecologic. We'll see you next time.